Hello fellow lovers of the liminal and the weird, and welcome to another video by Liminal Spaces. Today I am happy to be joined by Virgil from Literally Books. And today we are going to be discussing the 1981 book by Gene Wolfe, The Claw of the Conciliator. Is that how you say it?
I say well, I don't know now. I don't know how I say it.
Conciliator.
I almost repeated what you said. I was like, wait a minute, that's not going to work.
Conciliator. We're going to be discussing the second book in the Book of the New Sun by Gene Wolfe. And I wanted to ask you, Virgil, before we get into this book at all, kind of really quickly your story of how you found these books, because my story we already know and is very recent, but I think this has been something you've been really enjoying for a long time, right?
Right. I found it probably, I would have been probably in high school, I think, at a, what book? It would have been not Barnes & Noble. It was B. Dalton. B. Dalton books. It was at yeah, right.
They're not even around anymore.
Right. So it was a B. Dalton, and it was one of those little mall bookstores. It was just like almost a slot. You know, it was far deeper than it was wide.
Right.
And they had this science fiction and fantasy section. I saw these books, and immediately it was those covers. It was those covers that made me pick it up, and I thought, wow, this looks so cool. And it had all these quotes by these people saying all these great things about Gene Wolfe, who I didn't know anything about. So I ended up buying those and read them, and I could, like I said, I think right away, I had been a huge Lord of the Rings fan, loved Tolkien, and I read, just as I read like the beginning of that first chapter, I'm like, I think this is going to push Lord of the Rings out of the number one spot for me. I had like a feeling like right away, like, wow, this is really good. And it really is something that I just love. But it's a weird thing because it makes it seem like I must be super knowledgeable about it, and I don't feel that way.
I don't know if anybody's super knowledgeable about Gene Wolfe when you get right down to it.
Okay, fair enough. I like that. Yeah, I would have subscribed to that. I just feel like especially this reading is really the first time I've ever really taken notes. I mean, I kind of like took the surface level stuff before and just kind of thought, oh yeah, this and this, but this is the first time I've really like recorded some little thing that I saw and then thought about it later and thought, oh, wait a minute, that's interesting, something like this. So there's, I guess you could think of there being like two camps of people who've read the story, like people who've read it and they feel very new to it, and it's, kind of like, I'm very confused by things, and then people who feel a lot more confident about what's happening and have gotten to the deeper stuff, and I'm like somewhere in between those. I'm trying to get to the second camp, but it is a journey, but it's a lot of fun.
How many times have you reread this?
I've read it probably 3 times.
Okay.
Like twice, like once in high school, once like right out of high school. And those have been, we're just going to say a long time ago. Mm-hmm. It was in the 90s.
Yeah.
And then the last time I read it was in 2012. And so I've kind of been holding off on a reread, intending to reread it again. Mm-hmm. So it was due for reread. So I'm excited to reread it because this is the time I really feel like I'm really diving into it. So
yeah, when I finished this, when I read the last page, I had 2 desires. The first was to jump right into the third book, and the second desire was to go back to the first book and reread that book. It is amazing how much these make you want to reread them.
Exactly, I know, it's crazy. Because it's like you don't. I think I saw somebody said something one time like the book starts on your reread.
Yeah,
that's when the book starts. It's like, okay, yeah. And for me, since it's been a while, I don't know. I feel like I know the conclusion of a thing. It's almost like if you think about it like a Sherlock Holmes mystery. Like I know who did it,
right?
But I don't remember what the clues were that made it so that you knew that person did it.
Yeah.
That kind of a thing. And that's how I feel about it. Like I know the big overarching things, and I'm sort of like trying not to jump right to a conclusion. I'm like, wait a minute, look for the evidence.
Right.
Or you just right.
Yeah. I guess we should say this before we move on. We will be spoiling this book all the way through.
Right. Right. And the book before it.
And the book before it. If you haven't read the first two, perhaps you should go read the first one and this one before continuing on here. But okay, you want to go through the kind of not really a synopsis, but I figured we just go through chronologically through his travels. This book is interesting because the last book left us at the gate with some kind of ruckus going on, which was terrifying. And then this book opens up after a tiny bit of travel, I assume, where somehow he's been separated from Dorcas and the rest of the Dr. Talos and all of them, and has ended up in a town called Saltus with just Jonas, right?
Just Jonas and him, right?
Yeah, and Jonas is interesting, and we'll, of course, be spoiling this as we go, but as of right when I first started reading this, he was a human with a cyborg arm. They have stopped in Saltus because there's two people that need to be... that he has to do his job. He's a torturer, and they need to be executed. And there's a couple of interesting things that happen in this town of Saltus. But before I break into that, I really just quickly wanted to say there's people buried in the wall of Nessus. I think
something.
Yeah, it's kind of similar to the Great Wall of China. I think also has corpses buried in it. But they were like human. No, they were like not human, like alien human hybrids, which is where we first get this idea before we get to the kind of monkey people that are on the cover of this.
Yeah, I think they talk about how they're soldiers. Yeah, I think Severian describes how he was kind of like terrified by it, and he's like, "Oh," and Jonas who seems to know all about it. He kind of like says, "Well, here, let me tell you." They've just met him, and he just starts telling me a little bit about it, and he's kind of like, "These are just." I mean, he doesn't say this, but to me, the subtext is like these are people from other worlds and other times that are here that the Autar can call upon to like reawaken or something.
Yeah.
To at any moment. And then there's that, I guess, well, that's jumping ahead a little chapter, so I'll wait.
I know where you're going.
Fair enough. Cool.
And then he meets a green person who says he's from the future in Saltus before he does these executions. Anything? I got nothing on this green person, man.
Did I write something down about that? I don't remember.
And you can just always interrupt if I go too fast and pass something you want to talk about.
Oh, no, you're totally fine. I mean, there was some interesting things that happened in the town.
The weird prison house.
Yes, the describing like how they would treat this woman who I guess they think was a witch, and the things that went on with that, and then of course there's a conspirator. But I don't remember if the executions happen after. I think they happen after the Green Man.
Yeah, they do. He sees. How do you pronounce her name? Agia. A-G-I.
Agia. I think it's Agia.
Agia.
I did the audiobook again, so if I pronounce something, it's just because I'm trying to remember how the audiobook.
Right. Agia. I couldn't imagine trying to listen to these through audiobook. I would lose my thread so fast.
It was definitely like. It's good for review.
Yeah.
I mean, it would have been difficult to take notes.
Yeah.
I mean, those let you take notes, but yeah, so it was good for review. And then I actually was using the ebook too, so I'd stop and I'd go over there and I'm like, okay, and put a note in. So.
Oh, good. Yeah, Agia, he sees her running around in the crowd and tries to find her, and that brings him to the green man. I don't know if it's an alien or... Oh, he said he's from the future.
Yeah, and he does... Okay, so I guess the one thing... this is... Must have wrote that in a hurry. He does say something interesting because he says at one point to Severian, "I am human, but you are not." And I thought at first that just sort of meant like, I thought at first that meant that, I'm human. You're a person from another time period, and you're not. But the more I read this book and the more I thought about it, I think that he understands the difference, and he's saying, no, you're not human. And I think
Oh,
it's a very he's I think that might be it, and I'm not certain about that that's accurate, but there is some other stuff, of course, that comes up in a little bit that ties into that student story and some other things that make me think that there might be some truth to that.
okay, interesting. Yeah, I didn't catch that. I love
He
it.
says it very quickly, and it just comes off as though like an alien, like this person from the distant future who's biologically much different because he gets his sustenance from the sun, and the sun in this time in history is too weak, so he's slowly being starved.
Yeah,
And he drives people away by telling them their future.
yeah.
Because he he gives them an accurate prediction, and they're like, "Oh, I don't want to."
I don't like that prediction.
I don't like this guy. Get him out of here.
Yeah, I like
He's
that.
sort of surprised because Severian doesn't leave. He's like, "Wait a minute, you want to stick around?"
Yeah, the problem of the seer.
But
Interesting.
yeah, but it comes off as just sort of like, well, you're not really human. But then I thought, like, no, I think that he's saying that other people are human, but you're not.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I haven't figured. Of course, I haven't read the last two books. Have you read the fifth? Just out of curiosity.
Yes, I have read it. And actually, and anybody who sees this who's wondering, like, should I read that? Like, it was written later. Like, it is absolutely worth your time.
Oh, good.
It's very good, very, very good. And it's written in a way that it just flows right into that book, and it doesn't feel like a sequel.
Okay, good. Then I'm gonna have to pick up that one as well.
Yeah, I would highly recommend it. You will not be disappointed by that book.
So I'm doing this the best I can here.
You're doing great. I need the structure.
So then he runs and does an execution of the woman, the witch. I can't remember when they unboard the house, or even what happens.
It's sort of like and that's where it gets to be tough to recount these things. 'Cause
Yeah.
of how the book is. I'm segueing. I'm sorry. The book is very revisionist. Like, it'll tell you something, and then it'll go back and say, well, actually, I thought this, but really this.
Which is interesting because he's supposed to remember everything perfectly.
Right. But it's like he tells you what he thinks at the time, and he's like, yes, but actually, I realized later. This,
Yes.
but he doesn't tell you that till later.
Yep. But somewhere after that, they have dinner, Jonas and Severian, and he gets a letter from Thecla. And I had to look this up because I'd forgotten. But Thecla, of course, is a huge part of Shadow of the Torturer, the first book. I think kind of Severian's first love, right?
Yes, I think it. Yes.
Yeah, and he.
I was thinking back. Is that right? Yes, it is, as far as I remember. Yeah.
And he loves a lot of people, which is something we can get into later.
Yeah, that's something that book talks about too. Yeah.
I mean, it is weird that Agia, when he sees her in the crowd, he's like, "I still loved her." I realized. And then when he receives this letter from Thecla, he's like, "Oh my God, the woman I love is still alive." And then he loves Dorcas, and then he loves what's
Jolenta.
Yes, yeah. This guy just freaking loves everybody.
He even says at one point, he's like, "Yeah, I love them all," and he like lists them, and then this person, and you're like, "Okay,
yeah,
I'm not."
I just read Paprika and did a whole thing on the Japanese novel Paprika, and she had the same thing. Every person she dealt with, she's like, "I think I've fallen in love with him," and I was like, "Damn." But yeah, he's very excited to hear from Thecla that she's still alive because, of course, he helped her kill herself during the torture in the first book, and he goes to this cave to meet her and enters the cave, and this is the most Planet of the Apes section of the book. Yeah, did you write notes for that part?
I did. Let's see. Well, you know what? He said two things. I guess I have written down. One is that just a statement that Severian says that I really liked, which was that if humanity in its old age will be like an old man who reverts to a child.
Oh.
And that this is like, are these ape men sort of like the old, like a signal about the old age of humans. Like we've gone too far, we've gone too long.
Oh,
I thought that was an interesting statement that
yeah,
he just sort of said. I just liked it. I just
yeah,
happened to I made a note. Now, I would have not have remembered that if I had made a note. And then the other thing, which I think is neat, is like the cover and also
yep,
the way he describes it when he brings out the claw.
yeah.
To me, especially in the description of the book, feels like a Moses and the Ten Commandments moment.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
like it just felt like it just that's what I felt. I was like, oh, okay. I did not remember that from previous reading. It's only this time I thought, oh, that does kind of feel like very much a religious type moment. Obviously, it has. I mean, I think he almost says that. I don't know if he does, but almost does.
Yeah, and
I don't know. I just thought about that.
well, and it's interesting because that is when we learn what the claw does. Because he cuts off one of these ape man's hands, and when he pulls out the claw, everybody's in awe of him and they stop attacking him. But the person whose hand he cut up keeps reaching the stump for him towards the claw, and he touches it with the claw and it heals the wound. And we realize that this claw, which I don't know if it's just a stone, I love that on the front cover it's just a circle of light in his
Yeah,
hand. I don't know if this is one of the riddles that gets solved. I don't know if this is a form of technology that we are familiar with, or maybe it's a future tech, but it definitely has some kind of power, and he's unable to describe what the object is, so it just seems like a jewel, right, that he keeps in
yeah,
his boot. But I felt like they were hinting at some, and I don't know if this is Jonas that talks about this. They're hinting at some Island of the Dr. Moreau stuff here. That there was
yeah.
genetic research going on, right? That was making these hybrid human animal creatures.
Definitely, lots of pulp type vibes, like those early, like pulpy science fiction type stuff,
Yeah,
which I love. Um, Definitely felt like that. Like that. There. I mean, I don't want to. Again, I know I've read the next two books.
right.
So I don't want to
Exactly.
say anything.
You're in
I
a
don't want to
hard
say anything that's not in
position.
this book. It's not in these two books. So, you know, but yeah, both things that you said, that both of those things, I will say that the man apes and the claw are talked about again.
Oh, good.
They're discussed later.
Good. I'm glad.
So that's good.
The
But yeah,
riddle
I think that's
continues.
very accurate. And that's something too. It's hard for me to have distance to say, are the clues here that lead to this conclusion, or am I just having a very easy time assembling something that because I've already seen it finished.
Right. Yeah, I've read it so recently for the first time that I remember hands down that when he describes the tower that he lives in, he mentions that they used to launch spaceships from it. So like straight up that hint is dropped in that first book, right? That
Yeah.
tower is either a spaceship or where they used to launch spaceships. But for the life of me, when I first opened this book and read the first page, where is it? Right here. Right after the wall is like the covers of a book. The quote continues: "Before us now stood such a wood as might have been growing since the founding of Earth." And Earth is spelled Urth. And I read that this time and went, "Oh my God, was that what they called it through Shadow?" I can't even remember if that's the first hint that this is Earth. Is that it's spelled
Yeah.
Urth. Sorry.
Well, you know what? I can find out. I can find out for
Oh
you.
yeah, yeah,
I can
yeah.
do a. I can search the ebook. I'm not certain. I don't remember either. I want to say that maybe it's not referenced very often.
Right, because I felt stupid when I opened this book and went, "Oh, Earth." It's so obvious now.
Where are we at? Yes, there is something in the first book.
How many
The
mentions?
the first mention in the text that I see, um, it's a sentence. He says, "I sometimes think the reason the guild has endured so long is that it serves as a focus for the hatred of the people, drawing it from the autarch, the exultants, and the army, and even in some degree from the pale Cacogens who sometimes visit Earth, you spelled with a U, from the farthest stars. I think it's just because, I don't think that's unusual at all to have missed that, and I don't even know. Even and I read it recently too. I couldn't remember because I think you're just barraged with so much stuff.
I'm just shocked.
He's like it's like a magician's trick. He's over here doing things and he's picking your pocket.
Yeah,
where you're not looking.
Yep.
It's just like I didn't even know that was. How'd you slip that in there?
Well, you just said cacogens, and I didn't realize they were mentioned in the first book. I thought we were introduced to.
I didn't either. Because it's just like it's one of those words like I don't know what that word means.
Right.
Just keep going.
Visitors from the stars. Okay, aliens. Got it. Yeah, which is interesting. We've got aliens. We've got time travelers, if Green Man is telling the truth. We've got hybrids, human-animal hybrids, and robots. There's so much, and walking statues, which I still haven't figured these guys out yet.
I don't know either. I'm very interested in them, but I didn't try to figure them out. Yeah. I'm fascinated by those too.
Yeah. Sorry, we got off on a tangent there. So he goes down. These 8 men attack him. There's, I believe, this is like a stronghold that was left by an ancient technology. There's bars of silver in there.
I don't remember. See, I don't even remember that part.
Yeah.
So you're doing great.
There's these huge stacks of silver. Yeah.
You know what I did? Because they said there was treasure. They said there was treasure, but I forgot. Okay.
Yeah.
They're right.
And then he wakes up something deep underground. And I think this is what you were hinting at earlier. There's something. He talks about like an earthquake, like steps. Yeah.
And he gets terrified. And then the man apes, I think, don't they get terrified?
Yeah.
Yes, they do.
Yeah.
I had when I saw that, of course, I was thinking, I was just reminded of this of the Fellowship of the Ring, where like the Balrog comes and the goblins all scatter. It's like the scatter, or whatever. This was kind of what I reminded of.
Yeah,
I never thought. I don't know.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Yeah, and he just going to go on a tangent here for a second. He talks to Jonas about this later, right? What are these gods under the earth or whatever? And Jonas talks about, I can't remember when this is said, but they can't leave the water because they're so big that they'll fall apart. Have you ever seen the Miyazaki movie Nausicaa of the Valley of Wind?
Yes.
Every time he talked about these gods, I thought about the big...
Yeah. What do they call them? There's like the 7 somethings from the... I can't remember.
Yeah, from the
I know exactly
end times. These huge things that are like basically metaphors for nuclear weapons. I thought of that. These. I feel like they're connected to ancient technology. I really do. That these gods are, and of course we'll talk about it when we talk about the story we already brought up that's in the middle of this book. So the gods are interesting. If you had anything to throw in there.
I'll wait.
Okay.
Because I think it'll just get on a tangent.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
So he leaves the cave after producing the claw, and the monkey men stop fighting him, and he realizes that the claw heals people, and he leaves. Then he has to go back because he dropped his sword. I love half this book is him looking for his sword, I swear. What's the sword called?
Terminus Est.
Terminus Est, that's right.
Which means, I think he says it means the dividing line.
Oh, nice. I know he uses one side for killing women and one side for killing men. A lot of interesting mythology connected to his guild around this sword. Very, very cool. And then he comes out. The letter from Thecla was a lie. She is dead. She died. And this is Agia trying to kill him once again. Agia, what an interesting character.
I know. Just a real thorn in his side.
But he loves her, apparently.
Yeah, he loves her, even though she's so toxic, right?
Yeah.
There's that, it reminds me of that, going back to the first book, there's a line And this is how it seems like this is another thing that Wolfe seems to do, is like the very end of a chapter, he'll say something and you go, what? And there's a line at the end when they're in the chariot together in the first book, and they're racing, and Severian grabs her, I guess, to keep her safe, so she doesn't fall the chariot or something, or the whatever the transport that they're in.
It might have been right before they were going to crash, I think, if I remember correctly.
And he grabs her, and she says, "I'm so glad you grabbed me because I hate men that grab me." And you're like, and then and then it's like scene end, closed curtains, new chapter, and you're like, wait a minute, what? You hate? You know, like what? And then you realize, I think to some part later, you realize that she knows what she's going to have to do to some degree, and so she kind of has to like dislike that person for that, or hate them for that reason. It was, again, it's just one of those things where you're just like, did I get that right? Maybe you know what, I probably read that wrong. And then I went back and read it. I was like, he's saying no. This is a bad comment.
Yeah,
this is not a compliment.
Yeah. Do you think she cares about him at all?
I think so. I think she does, because there's some moments when they're traveling together where you can kind of see that she's if nothing else, I think she's conflicted about the plot that she's part of.
Right.
I think she knows what she's doing isn't great, and I feel like her brother is kind of like encouraging it.
I think her brother,
and that she doesn't. Yeah. He seems a lot more devious
in the first book. You're saying yes.
Yeah, he's a lot more devious. I think that he's very manipulative.
Yeah.
And I feel as though he's sort of like is the mastermind in these plots, and that she's along. I feel like she's maybe a little conflicted about it, and she's trying to justify it by hating somebody.
Yeah. And I love at the end that they're just like, we wanted your sword.
Yeah. Because the brother, like, I can't remember, it's Aja, and
I can't remember.
He has an A name too. They're very they're rhymey.
Yeah, they're twins.
And he says, well, you refused to sell us your sword. He like gives him like a list of Severian's crimes against them, and one of them was like, you refused to sell us your thing at any price, which is a crime in our what is it, in our
guild
society?
Good Lord.
Like, it just makes you like, say, here's all the things you've done wrong, even though we tried to have a plot to kill you.
Oh, okay. So Ajia had tried to kill him. She has some assassins there. He kicks their butts, I think, if I remember. I think he kills them all, and he's about to kill her, and he chooses not to. Jonas leaves so that he can kill her, and he chooses not to. And Jonas is like, "Did you kill her?" when they're coming back, and he's like, "No, I couldn't. I shoulda." And Jonas is like, "Yeah, you probably shoulda." and that kind of...
Yeah, I think he says you should have, but he's like, "But you did the right thing by not..." Or he says something along the lines of, "You did the right thing by not doing it."
Yeah.
Like, it would have been wrong if you had. He said something like, "It would have been wrong had you."
Yeah.
Something like that.
Yeah.
Which is good. Jonas is a very, like, noble character.
Yeah. Yeah, and I like the concept that he was looking at what is logically smart versus which is morally smart.
Right.
And that he chose the morally smart path on this one, and chose to leave her alive. Jonas, very interesting.
Yeah.
I feel like they have this conversation that we were talking about the gods, at which point, I think this has already happened in the book, before they're kidnapped, which we'll get to in a minute. They've already had this conversation. I think it's at the inn. Oh, yes. They go back to the inn, and one of the clubs that the monkey person had, that Severian grabbed and took with him without thinking about it, they get back and it's made out of gold. Like the entire club is gold. So they're like, we're set. And that's when they have this conversation with Jonas, where Jonas is like, you can ask a couple of questions and then we're never talking about this again. And they talk about the gods. And I think is it that discussion where Jonas reveals that he was part of a crew in a spaceship that returned to the planet?
I think so. I don't remember if he overtly says it, but it might be a little cryptic. But yeah, he does sort of talk about that he sail. I don't know if he says I sailed through the stars or something like that.
Yeah.
Something along those lines.
And crash landed.
Yeah, and then he had an accident. Does he say that's at this point that he had the accident? And that
he just says he had an accident and they had to replace parts of his body, at which point we're like, oh my God, they had to put that metal arm on him.
The metal arm on him.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Little did we know.
Right. I think I have a quote actually from right what we were just talking about. One last question I said, and then I promise I won't ask you anything more. So earlier I'm on page 63 in my copy. He tells Jonas, I know that you used to be a sailor. And I think when they're talking about sailors, they're meaning sailing through the stars, but I don't know. But he says, you used to be a sailor because when we were at the gate, you told us a story about the people buried in the gate. And that comes from this little brown book that Severian carries around. I love that he carries a book of myths with him. That's brilliant. So I know because of your stories that you are a sailor. And I want to read this quote really quick, if you don't mind. I nodded. Your story might have come out of the book. When I first carried it to Thekla, I supposed it was intended for children or for adults who enjoyed childish things. But when we had talked about some of the thoughts in it, I understood that they had to be expressed in that way or they couldn't be expressed at all. If the writer had wanted to describe a new way to make wine or the best way to make love, he could have used complex and accurate language. But in the book he really wrote, he had to say, in the beginning was only the hexameron. Or, it is not to see the icon standing still, but to see the still standing. Oh, but just, yeah, that's what it says. The thing I heard underground was that one of them. I freaking love this. Just like I love the wall is like two covers separating books, because I feel like it's a bit meta. He's talking about how he has to tell this story. He could just sit down and complexly tell you, okay, this is a society that had aliens and space travelers, and now it's... But he doesn't do that because he has to tell it this way. And I love I feel like it's very witty that he keeps doing this through here. So that was the other quote I really wanted to look at from that section.
Yeah, I like that. I know one of the... Yeah, because I think Jonas says, well, you can ask me 3 questions and we never talk about it again, like you said. I think one of them... I think he tries to ask Jonas the 4th question.
He does.
And I only remember this because I just looked at it today. And he said, why haven't... He was talking, I think, about the man-apes. He says, they live underground and they've been changed by something. He says, well, why haven't we who live on the surface been changed? And Jonas, like... The way that Jonas doesn't answer makes Severian think that they have.
Yeah.
He says, maybe we have. He says, he says something just like that.
I forgot about that. That's perfect. You're absolutely right.
This is all packed in there. I know.
Yeah, because then I'm like, ooh, everybody on the surface has changed. Yeah. and again, it connects to what you said earlier. I like this theme you're pulling out about the Green Man saying, you're not human. Everybody around you is human, but you're not human. Yeah, like how much change has occurred. And we haven't even started talking about mirrors. That was one of your questions, but I think it'll obviously come up here. Because, of course, that's what I was looking for through all of this was
I know.
To continue my mirror thought. Okay, so they get kidnapped by Vodalas?
I heard it as Vodalas.
Vodalas is a revolutionary against the Autarch. Am I saying Autarch right?
Yes.
And so you've got the Autarch and the rebels, and Vodalas is the leader of the rebels, and he... Severian meets him very early in his life and actually saves his life in the graveyard at the beginning of the first book. So he has a connection to Vodalas. Vodalas gives him a coin that he's obsessed with, but leaves in the crypt. And when they arrive with... they kill their kidnappers on the way to Vodalis's place so that they ride in like standing on the wagon with the dead around them, like a couple of bosses. Him and Jonas like ride in and like, yeah, we're coming in to talk to you, but we're coming in on our terms, buddy.
Yeah, it's a very epic moment. Right?
Yeah, good Lord.
Let me ask, what do you think it was that they were riding in on?
Well, they keep calling these I picture horses, and I know that's not right.
I don't remember why I think this. This is why, but I thought of like not an elephant, but something elephant-like.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember they were saying they talked about it a little bit.
They use a word. He uses a word. I didn't look the word up. It just had the impression. It didn't ever say anything about. I don't think it says anything about a trunk or anything like that. It's just It's an animal. I don't even know if he says it's big, but they talk about riding like on a litter on its back or something like that.
Yeah. Yes.
And it doesn't. That's all I know. I don't know how. I pictured something elephant-ish, not quite an elephant. Like, I don't know.
Yeah, that's something that's
mutated.
Every time, and I'd find my brain just making things normal, and I think that's a mistake for this book because everything, and maybe that is how a movie version of it could work. I have no idea. Like you said, if they just got as weird as they could, with these things. But you're absolutely right.
I just was thinking about that. I'm like, I don't know what I don't think it ever really said without looking up that word.
Yeah.
And to see what that word is trying to tell you or trying to suggest or something.
Right.
Which I didn't do.
Yeah.
And I also like how before he kills the captors, he talks about how this forest, it's almost like a jungle is what it seems like, but it's probably maybe it's a forest.
Yeah.
But it's so big and vast. And he talks about traveling through it on the back of this creature like they're in a boat and it's like an ocean of green or something like that.
Yeah.
And I loved it. It was such good imagery. I just loved it.
Yeah, no, truly. And I find that throughout this book, I mean, the garden that they're in at the end is absolutely, and they go on the boat ride with her, and Jolenta is her name, I think.
Yep.
So we meet Thea, finally, who is the sister of Thecla. Thank you. Thecla's...
That's okay. It helps that I've heard someone say the name. So.
Right. Thecla was the woman that he was in love with, his first love from the first one that he helped commit suicide, which is why all this is happening. But Thea, he met before Thecla, and of course he wonders whether or not he's in love with Thea, because that's what happens when Severian meets a woman anytime. But then... I was enjoying the crap out of this book. I loved the monkeys.
I did too. I really did. I love that scene.
I do too. It's such a good scene. But this took it up a notch. This dinner.
Oh yeah.
Oh my god. There's obviously alien animals on Earth, and they have this. Do they take it from the bile gland? There's this animal, this alien animal that they can take a secretion from. And if you drink some of this secretion and then eat the skin of a dead person, all that person's memories will join yours in your head.
Yeah.
And they
Which
eat
is what they
Thecla.
do.
They eat Thecla.
Right. Somehow they've gotten a hold of her body and they've brought it to this hideout, and they can. Everyone is supposed to be complicit.
Yeah.
Everyone you have to eat. You're here. There's not, and I don't think Severian is very nauseated.
Mm-hmm.
And it's
Does Jonas do it?
Jonas Jonas pretends.
Yes.
He says later, he says, I've mastered the skill of pretending to eat.
Yeah, I wonder
so he
why.
does it. And so Severian's like, you didn't eat it? He's like, are you kidding me? He's like very surprised that Jonas didn't eat it.
Yeah.
That was great.
Yeah. But speaking of beautiful prose, everything leading up to this, I mean, it's so gory, but so beautifully written. And for I think that Severian is nauseated, but he's also really freaking happy to allow Thecla to live inside of him as well. It is weird for me to think that everybody else at that table is doing the same. But yeah, I mean, I looked up, so when they said Thecla, when he said Thecla, I was like, who the hell is Thecla? Which I did a lot through this book. There's an old guy that obsesses with him and calls him master. I still can't remember his name.
I can't remember that guy. I know exactly what you're talking about.
I had to look up him when he showed up. But I looked up Thecla, and the first thing that came up, and that's the hard part of looking up characters in this book, was somebody saying on Reddit, did they eat Thecla? Like, that was straight up what came up, and I was like, eat Thecla, what's happening here?
Yes, they definitely do. He has to consume a portion of her flesh. Yes.
Yeah, and we were talking about that dinner, which I think we said. Is there anything else you wanted to say about the psychedelic dinner?
No, it was very. It was a very memorable thing. You like Severian having like this unusual experience, and it almost like had a sense of nausea to it. Like he's like having these visions, and you could tell he's very, I don't know, stoned or something. I guess you could tell he's heavily under the influence of a drug, and he's having these weird visions, and he's like nauseated. And he says that if I hadn't been so drugged up, I probably would have been actually sick. But because it was like I couldn't really connect to my thoughts to what was going on, and so I just that's why I was able to tolerate it. So
it was interesting to me because when I finally met the revolution, I expected to understand more politically of what was going on, and
it's just vague. It's like a chess game. They're the black. They're the white pieces, and we're the black pieces.
Yeah,
cards that are at night, and you're like, okay,
yeah.
Cool. You know, you don't know where everybody stands. Severian doesn't seem like he doesn't really know.
Yeah,
he's just like, well, you know.
Well,
well, actually, there was something. There was something. A little bit, just a little before that dinner when they first come in there.
Yeah.
When he first meets Vodalus again, I guess. I had this impression that of like Vodalus and the whole thing was very much like Robin Hood.
Yeah.
Real heavy Robin Hood thing. You know, I don't know. It reminded me of Robin Hood and Time Bandits.
Yeah.
It reminded me. That's why I just thought of that. I don't know that scene. Not exactly. That's this comedic scene,
right?
Exactly, but it sort of did, and I was just like, it's a very Robin Hoodish theme going on here.
Oh, and it's interesting because, and I have to spoil forward just a tiny bit, but it's interesting to me that Severian is similar with leaders as he is with the women, in that he swears allegiance to both sides at one point.
Exactly. Totally. Yeah, exactly. And then well, I guess. Go ahead. Do you have more to say about the after the dinner? I'll go from there. Now I'd just be jumping ahead.
Just plot wise. He swears his allegiance to Vodalus, and then Vodalus sends him and Jonas out to deliver a message to somebody at what's the name of the castle? Absolute.
The House Absolute.
The House Absolute, yeah, which is the seat of the Autarch's power. So they start heading north and going up in that direction.
Was there something right after at the end of the Vodalus thing? Was it? Oh, we did something we meant to talk about. We could come back, but with the. Before he gets to Vodalus, all the piles of clear coffins that he sees. Do you remember that scene?
I
Right after they're
do.
captured.
Because they're grave robbers. They eat the flesh.
Yeah.
Like, how many people are in these people's heads?
Yeah, that's what's crazy. I don't know.
Yeah.
It makes you wonder because I don't know if Severian is having a unique experience because he can remember everything, but it seems like Thekla is alive inside of him. In fact, she is.
Yeah.
That happens many times.
I mean, the way they
And
describe the drug, that's what it does.
yeah, like like they live again, but only inside of you.
Right.
So you have to wonder what these other people are like, or I don't know.
And it made me realize that the opening of the first book, where he sees them, they're grave robbing in the first book.
Yeah,
Like,
right.
I mean, this is what this revolution does. They grave rob.
Yeah, it was just so weird because they're while they're still tied up, they're going through this area where there's like these ruins and there's all these like clear or glass coffins and things. They're talking about that, and they're just sort of
I wonder what they
just
were.
looking around. And it was I don't really know where they were. It was before they went in the forest, I think.
No, but I wonder.
I'm not sure.
I wonder if he's describing. I wonder if there's a riddle in there. I wonder if they're not glass coffins. If they're.
I think it's supposed. I got the impression that it was people in like some kind of a stasis,
Ooh.
like a cryogenic stasis.
Yeah.
But it says something, and it's real. I do remember it's kind of hard to pick apart, like especially in remembering what he's trying to describe because it's so like it's science fiction described in terms of fantasy.
Yeah.
And it's like he talks about how the villages gathered this stuff up and threw it out into the wilderness.
Yeah.
Or something like that. And it's like, well, then what were they in? What are these people living in? I don't know. That they had to dig it up and get it out of there or something. I'm not sure. Maybe I'm misremembering it, but that's my impression.
No, you're right. I completely forgot about it, but when you describe it, yeah, absolutely. I like stasis. That's interesting. That there was just a bunch of people in stasis that were in the way, so they just threw them out
there. And
wow.
I think he describes them rotting like they were, and they just were like, who cares? And then like now they're not, like the bodies just are decayed and gray. I can't remember. I get the impression that they're not viable anymore. They're not preserved.
So those weren't. I think what I thought was that they and I don't have anything to back this up with. I think it's just what my brain did to make sense of it. Was that they were coffins of them doing this ritual. So it was all the stuff they grave robbed. But I don't think the book points to that at all. I think the fact that he made those glass coffins is important. Because he doesn't do anything without a meaning.
Yeah, right. Sometimes you could think, am I reading too deep? And here, usually it's like, probably not.
Nope.
Probably okay.
In fact, I feel like I'm reading too lightly.
There's only so much you could. There's only so much you could do in a first reading.
Right.
So.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Okay, how do you pronounce these monsters? Notules. The No-Tools?
Oh, I think the way the audiobook was saying it sounded like nodules or noodles.
Yeah, but it's with a T.
I kept thinking
No-Tools.
I kept thinking it was like this was a weird pronunciation, and I just thought like a knot. I didn't know what to think of the pronunciation.
Yeah. So they're heading north, and they're heading up to the House Absolute, I think it's called. Yeah, and they're attacked by these No-Tools, or however you pronounce that, which are like bats, I guess, that are
they kind of look like bats.
Yeah,
it's weird. At first you think it is something like a giant bat or something, but then he cuts one and he doesn't realize at first, but it multiplies.
Yeah.
Like a starfish or something, right?
Yeah.
And then Severian, like they run, and then I guess he and Jonas get separated or something, and they follow Severian. He breaks through some woods at one point, and there's some kind of a guard, a patrolman, and he says something like, "Take his life, not mine," or something like almost like a prayer, and the guy fires up his torch. He has some kind of a fire lance or something. I think it's like a fiery lance. I don't know if it's it's supposed to be like a flamethrower or not. I don't quite think it's a flamethrower, but I'm not sure what it is.
Yeah, me neither.
And then these things go right for him, but they don't go after the heat from the fire. They go after this guy, and he becomes like a sacrifice.
Yeah, he basically just uses this guard to get away from him. But it's okay because he uses the claw after that to bring this dude back to life.
He's like, listen, I got it out.
And this claw, this is like a miracle machine, this claw. I don't quite know. And it's weird. And I don't remember, and maybe you remember, big characters, at least one big character dies in this book. And I don't think he tries to use the claw, but I might be wrong. We'll have to look when we.
When we get there. Okay.
Yeah, when we get there, we'll have to look it up and see, or maybe you remember exactly what happens at that point. But anyway, yeah, he brings him back to life. But I love these crazy creatures that I think Wikipedia described them as energy vampires, which I didn't.
Yeah, kind of.
Yeah, I didn't think that way, but when you say it, it kind of makes sense. But yeah, I like this idea of they're just looking. They're cold and looking to heat their own bodies, but they can only do it through taking the heat from somebody else's.
Right, it has to be like living heat.
Yeah. Yeah, really strange.
And then Jonas seems like he knows all about it, and he's kind of like educates Severian, and they find some kind of container, and Jonas pulls one out of each. There's 3 of them at this point because he's cut it twice. He pulls one out of each one of this guy's nostrils and puts it in there, and then pulls one out of his mouth. And he's like, "We're okay," because they're fed. They're just like they're fat and lazy right now, essentially. So we put them in here, and then they're trapped.
They're like leeches.
Yeah.
And
so he puts them in there, and Jonas just knows. He says a few things, but I do not remember what Jonas says. But he has a couple little. He says he's encountered them before, or something along those lines. And he says something. He said, "Oh, at another." Severian's like, "Oh, at another continent." He's like, "Another place." He doesn't say like in space, another planet or anything.
Right.
It's like you as the reader think, "Oh, he means another planet." Probably it seems like, or I thought.
Yeah.
But Severian's like, "Oh, you just mean like some weird island."
Right. Now, oh gosh, I don't know if you're going to remember this to this degree. Don't they say in the first one that there's people living on the moon?
I think so. If you have that memory, then that's probably true.
Yeah, I think I think there's people living on the moon, which is crazy to me. And the moon is green because they've terraformed it.
Maybe that was from the Green Man. Or did he say that?
I think it was in the first book. But anyway, sorry. We're getting
it would be hard for us. I don't know. I do think that there is something like that, yes.
Crazy cool creatures. I don't know if they're coming back, but they were awesome. I love doing this with you because you remember parts. I forgot completely of him pulling them out of the nostrils and the mouth and sticking them in the bottle.
I did, yeah. I remember that part. I was like, and I don't remember it from a previous reading at all.
Right.
Like, I didn't remember that part. And then I was just like, well, what are these things?
Yeah.
And then it's like, oh, so weird. I don't remember them to like, he says they're like tissue paper almost.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know if we've seen the last of them, but they were definitely interesting.
And we could say, I don't think it's ever clear in this book where they came from, why they're not native,
right?
I don't think.
I think they're aliens. It's got to be an alien beast.
So it's like because Jonas says something about somebody is controlled them or sent them after us.
Yeah.
He says that like it was an assassination attempt.
Yes.
That makes me wonder about Adja, but I don't know if it's Adja.
Yeah, that's the best guess I think we have through context. I think that's the best guess. So he brings the guy back to life with the claw in a chapter called The Claw of the Conciliator, which is the name of the book. And then he sees a big statue thing walking. One of my favorite parts, just because it's beautifully described in the prose. This tall, very white, walking statue. And of course, the Autarch's people are all very tall and very beautiful. So I don't know if this is an alien race that is somehow connected to the royal family or what. But yeah, it was just absolutely beautiful. And then he's reunited with... Is it just two of them? Badlanders, Baldlanders, and Dr. Talos.
And Talos?
Yeah, and that guy we were talking about earlier, who's the old guy that calls him Master.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I can't remember the guy who's upset, who's like... I don't know. I get like a... who's the guy who helped Dracula?
Renfield.
Yeah, it was like a Renfield type. Very Renfield.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so he meets those three, and then he's like, the guy wants to follow him, and he like just is like pushes him aside. I can't remember how he says it, but he's like, "I'll be right back" or something, and he runs off.
You're right. Yeah, you're right. He does. He runs.
Yeah,
he runs off.
Yeah, he's like, "Forget this guy." He doesn't really like this guy.
No, he doesn't.
Yeah, I don't get any sense that that he likes him at all. But he runs off, and they get captured and taken to the antechamber, which is strange. The strangest prison I've ever read in a book. I think I texted you at one point while I was reading this and said, I'm in this weird room.
Yeah.
This weird dark room. That's where I am in the story.
The whole prison scene is very strange. You've got generational prisoners in here that were supposed to, like, they're put in here and supposedly at some point they're supposed to be judged, but they just never are.
Yeah.
And it's like this, I don't know how, the space seems very big, that they're in, and they just have, like, there's, I think Severian or maybe Jonas says, there's people in here who have never not been a prisoner.
Yeah.
Like, they were born here.
Yeah. I think he actually says their grandparents were born here.
Because he's like, he's like, I'm not even sure if it's their grandparents or how many greats are involved.
Yeah, and Jonas also reveals that this used to be a suite of many rooms, but they've removed the walls and lowered the ceiling. They lift up the ceiling and realize that this is one huge room that used to be many little rooms. And then I think through Thekla's memory in his head, he realizes that this didn't start as a prison. It is a waiting room for you to move on to go into the House Absolute. You have to wait in this room, and they just leave people in there, which is so messed up.
Yeah.
I couldn't believe it, because it was just so dark that, I mean, literally there were people that were waiting to see the Autarch or somebody in the House Absolute and died waiting, but had kids that had grandkids waiting. I mean, it's this concept of what's the politics of this again, and the answer is there are no politics to this. I don't know anybody that's doing anything.
Yeah, the political element, like whatever they are, is turned so far down, or it's so obscure that you really couldn't say where anybody stands.
Yeah.
And the closest I remember seeing was when Severian talks about whether it's like the function of a torturer's guild in a society.
Yeah.
And how they do that. He talks about that. That's maybe the closest political stuff I've remember seeing so far.
Yeah, which I do have to say I actually really appreciate. I'm not a huge fan of political intrigue in my books. And there's nothing wrong with it. It's not what I look for. And I think that this creates almost that Alice in Wonderland sense that I was talking about earlier, in that it just lets every place be as weird as it can be without having to be grounded in its purpose, if that makes sense. So, I mean, is this a waiting room or a prison? Don't know.
Yeah, doesn't know. Yeah,
yeah, doesn't matter. It is
it's a waiting room that became a prison, and then are both types of people brought together, anyways. Just sort of like, well, either way, they go in there.
Yeah, and there's a weird, and maybe you understood this better than I did. There's a weird person that shows up once a night to whip people with an electric whip.
Yeah, I think. Let me think here. I don't know if it's there. But I think later, I think it might be in one of those moments where we exit the story and we go to like the frame, which is like Severian much later writing this down.
Mm-hmm.
And he talks about, I'm not sure where that happens. And he talks about how that like the nobles or I don't know if they're the exaltants or what class they are, would knew the secret door and would go in there and I assume just for fun. Like this is something they just, and they said something about a monster too.
They did, and I didn't know if it was another one of these gods or what they were talking about.
I don't remember I don't remember.
The Wikipedia.
I don't know if I saw it.
The Wikipedia just said, and then there's a monster loose.
Yeah, I don't. I don't think we ever see it. I don't think we do. I don't know what the connection is yet.
No, me neither.
I don't remember. I don't know what the connection is. Maybe that's clarified in a later book.
And that's half the fun.
He does? Yeah. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Oh, it's fine. So when I made a video about the first book, one of the things that I said in it is, at one point he goes under his tower to this room and he meets this woman because he's chasing this dog, and I'm like, and there's no meaning to it. It means nothing. And a lot of people commented and said, wait, that is so important. Just wait, it comes up later. So I'm like, ooh, cool. So I was expecting it in this book, and of course, nothing happened with it in this book.
It does talk about it. It says, "Oh yeah, remember the Atrium of Time." Okay,
is that called the Atrium of Time?
I think that's what I think he's talking about because he mentions her name, which starts with a V.
Oh man, see,
God. Yeah, I don't remember what her name is. Yeah, I know. Well, I did read this, and then I went back and I read the second half again because I thought, well, I'm gonna need one more pass on that. Yeah. I just couldn't remember enough.
Yeah. The Atrium of Time, is that? So that's what that thing underneath the tower is called. Okay.
One more. This is humorous because you bring up the dog. How do you think the dog's name? Do you remember what the dog's name was? It's okay if you don't.
I don't.
So I do. I always thought it was, never having read it physically, I thought it was Trickskull or something like that. The pronunciation in the audiobook is tricycle. I mean yeah, I know. Which maybe that is how you pronounce it, but every time I thought it's tricycle.
Tricycle.
My dog Tricycle, and I was like,
oh
okay,
my goodness.
All right, I'm gonna take it. That's fine.
Oh, I wonder if you remember this. I'm sorry, this is a tiny bit of a tangent. We'll get right back to it. But a lot of people commented on my video that they tried to read the first book, but they couldn't handle the animal cruelty. And I don't know what they're talking about. Is it because the dog is sick and he's trying to chase it, or did I miss something?
In the beginning of the book, he talks about, like, there's the Torturer's Tower, the Witch's Tower, and the Tower of the Bear. And the Tower of the Bear is like this group of people, generally men, who like raise, I don't know if it's just fighting animals, like for an arena type scenario or not. I'm not quite certain. They do say that the people who live in the Tower of the Bear take an animal for a wife. They do say that. Like they marry a bear or whatever. And I think the idea is that Tricycle is some sort of like a dog fighting dog. Boy, that's how he got injured, and he was injured and messed up, and he just kind of got cast off, and Severian finds him.
I never felt like it was.
It wasn't. I didn't think it was. It never described it. It said that it happened.
Yeah. I don't know.
It wasn't like Severian wasn't condoning it, to my knowledge.
I think I got 3 comments, and I was like, man, I love animals. And I don't feel like I ever had to sit through like a torture scene of an animal. I couldn't figure out what they were referring to. Okay, so I
that's the only thing I can think of.
I totally forgot about the Clan of the Bear or whatever it was called.
Yeah, I think it's only a couple paragraphs.
Yeah,
at most.
I remember it now, but it made me think of Baldur's Gate 3. Okay, anyway, back to this. I have a theory about why Jonas in this is suddenly sick. He can't handle being locked in this room, which really confused me at first. And he says, I can't be in here. I can't be in here. I'm gonna go insane.
Oh yeah, he does say that.
Yeah. Do you have any ideas for that? I have to plot spoil for my idea.
I know why. I don't know why about that. Why locked in there is going to make him... Maybe because he's worried. I don't know if it has ties to who his supposed masters are. If there's something going on there.
Huh.
Or I don't know if there's something along those lines.
I wonder...
Or if...
Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead.
So I have to spoil, and this is about to be found out anyway. In fact, I think it's found out in this chapter. So I'm not spoiling. Jonas gets very sick, says he can't be in here, and tells the story, really tells the story of how he came to be, and we slowly start to learn, although I think it comes after they get out of this room, but we slowly start to learn that Jonas is not a person with a robot arm. Jonas is a robot with a lot of human parts. Jonas is a robot. I wonder if he is solar powered.
Oh,
I
don't know.
That was my guess as to why he had such a problem with being in that room. That he depended on the sunlight to keep all of his robot parts running smoothly. I have no idea.
Maybe.
Yeah.
I don't know.
That was just a total guess. There's no real hint in the book that pointed me to that at all. But when I started realizing he was a robot, I was like, oh my God, he can't be out of the sun. I don't know.
I do remember when the recreational whipping aristocrats show up or whatever, that I think Severian gets hit, and he said it was extremely painful. But it's my impression it's more like getting tasered or something.
Yes, it's electric.
Like it really hurts.
Yeah,
yeah. But I think it messes. I think it messes with Jonas's circuitry or something, and that he's like, it's like, because you can see he's almost like has like he loses function. Like he's just not functional anymore, very functional anymore, and he kind of is very distant.
Yeah,
I don't know. And Severian tries to use the claw on him, and it's like, nope, nothing.
Yeah, can't use the claw on robots.
Yeah, it doesn't work.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah. Any notes you had on that chapter?
Did I have anything else on that? What did I do? I don't think so. I think you got everything I did. Nope. I don't know what I did with my note, but no, I don't.
So they escape because there's a secret door. I forgot who told him there was a secret door, but he remembers the password because Thekla is inside of him. And of course, this is where Thekla grew up. So he has all kinds of memories about the House Absolute. I forgot who told him there was a door. I swear, maybe he just remembered it through Thekla.
I think that's what it was.
Yeah.
I think you're right. I think so.
So they get out and they start moving through the House Obsolete. House Absolute.
Absolute.
It is an obsolete.
They don't make vodka there, or at least we don't know.
I believe that this is a spaceship that they're in. And I think that the book is starting to point to that. And we finally get to mirrors. And Jonas... So that I think... For some odd reason, I thought of this in Star Trek terms, that they're walking through this old spaceship that they don't know is a spaceship, and they make it to the transfer room. What do they call that in Star Trek? The where's Jason when you need him?
Shoot, I cannot think of it either.
Yeah, beam me up. Transporter room.
Transporter room. I think you're right.
Yeah, and of course, to Severian, it's just a room full of mirrors. But to Jonas, who is, I think, very old and has been traveling the star system and knows the technological society before Severians, instantly goes, this is a transporter room, and transports himself. I had questions that, of course, are impossible to answer, but maybe with time we'll know. Did he come with Severian because he knew this guy was going to end up close to the House Absolute? And, I mean, was he truly looking only for these teleporters? Or did he just happen upon him and go, hey, there's somewhere I got to go, and just take off? He seemed so happy to find them.
Yeah, I don't know. That's a good point. It might be why he was following Severian. I don't really know.
Yeah,
because they just kind of the book starts and they've just kind of. I mean, at the end of the first book, they're just sort of like a random acquaintance.
Yeah,
like he just starts talking, because Jonas is really interested in Jolenta.
Yes,
which is interesting considering what we just talked about. It's like, why is he so interested in Jolenta?
Right, you know? It's so crazy.
So. He's really, really interested in, although everybody's interested in Jolenta,
of course.
Still, but Jonas just was like, he was like, "Well, we're gonna meet." And that's kind of how, like, the carrot that keeps Severian kind of like, "Oh, you know, if you stay with me, you might find Jolenta." He's like, "Okay."
Right. Yeah.
But then maybe part of that was like, you know, we could see maybe he sort of knew.
Yeah.
You know, well, you're gonna go to the House Absolute. Maybe there's something there for me.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know, and like, of course, I'm wondering, like, where did he teleport to? Like, what? Is he going to go get his old body back? Does he know where there's a place that he can get robotic limbs again? I don't know. But really,
he does say something about, I'm going to get repaired.
Yeah,
he said something like that.
Yeah,
something about getting fixed or repaired. I think he didn't say he says fixed, but something about, he doesn't say healed either, though. He says it like repaired or something.
Yeah, I love.
Okay, well,
I love Jonas. I'm happy to. I hope to see him again, and I'm sure we will. But I'm guessing.
Yeah, and you could kind of, and there's a moment too where Jonas, because like right after Severian reads that story, he kind of reads that story, which we could probably save to talk about to the end.
No, you're right. No,
it's
coming up. Yeah, it's coming up.
Wherever you want to talk about it, he reads that story to Jonas to kind of like, to maybe, because he's worried what's happening to him because he's like non-responsive, and then after he's done, one of the little kids in the prison sneaks up and says, "Oh, says something about the story," and Jonas says that's a very old story, and then he says something else about the story that kind of definitely clues you into what that story was and where it comes from.
Yep.
And then Severian says, "I write this down because it's the second to last thing he said to me," or something, and you're like, "Oh no."
Yeah. Oh shit, you're right. Oh no. But you are absolutely right. I really truly jumped ahead. He tells this story before they escape the antechamber. They're in the antechamber when he tells this story, and we absolutely have to talk about this story. Do you want to be the one to talk about the mythical connections to this story? Do you want to introduce it? What's it called?
I'll let you do that, and then I'll just interject.
Okay, perfect.
Or not interject, but I'll add.
Okay, perfect. So yeah, we're on to the chapter called "The Tale of the Student and His Son," and this is the story of. Do they call it an ogre?
I think ogre or giant.
Yeah, ogre or giant. So there's see if I can remember this. There's a young man who lives in a town that is full of inventors.
Mm-hmm.
This is the part I'm going to be the weakest on.
Okay, so I do remember this part. So, he has a master, and the master's like, well, he says something like, I don't really want to be, everyone in this town, there's a rule in the town. We'll start from there.
Yeah.
That if you want to stay there, you have to become one of these, like a sage or like a wise man of some sort. Or the alternative is you have to leave.
Yeah.
It's one or the other. And so this young man says, well, I don't know that I really want to be a sage, but I don't really want to leave. And he's like, I want him a little more time. Or no, he says, what should I do? And then the older master says, well, when you were young, you made what it seems to be like a golem-like creature.
Right.
You made a creature out of a dream.
Yeah.
When you were young, you did this. He's like, do that, and you're in. You got it. He's like, I guarantee you'll ace it. You're part of the city.
Yeah.
And he's like, well, He's like, well, how about I wait for it? Can I wait? And he's like, okay.
It's like a metaphor for having kids.
He's right. And then he's like, well, can I wait one more time? And he's like, well, you really should. And he's like, I'm getting a lot of flack for it, but okay. And then it says this town also has one curse, and that's every spring they send their most beautiful women, who have yellow hair and green dresses, that they call the corn women, I think.
Yeah, corn maidens.
Or I think it's corn. I want to say corn, but maybe I'm using the wrong word.
Wheat.
I think it's something like that, and they send them off to this ogre or giant that lives on another island. It's part of like the price they have to pay for their peace or something.
Corn maidens.
Corn maidens. That's it.
Yep.
They send them off.
Yeah.
And the young man, the young student, is so upset by this. He's like, okay, I'm gonna make a golem figure, a person from Dream, and he spends all this time, and he makes this. So he spends all this time, does all these things, and he makes a young, fully grown, able-bodied, heroic son figured from Dream. And I love the imagery too, like when he first appears, because he's like sitting there working, and he hears the door open just a little bit, as like the faintest of breeze would blow open, and then he can hear like these confident steps, and the door suddenly slams open, and it's this very healthy young man's voice, like very courteously saying, "Father, I'm so sorry to disturb you, but I just I think he says, I just had a dream or something." It's such a really amazing scene. I love it so much.
It's like creations of demigods.
Yeah,
I mean, it's so definitely interesting. Like these are almost like gods creating demigods to fight. And when we connect what this story is, it really makes sense in that aspect that the Greek myth that this is based on is absolutely about a demigod. But anyway, keep going. You're killing it.
Okay. So he tells this young man about what's happening, and he's like, instantly, he says, I've held off telling you this because I know I didn't want you to go off before you were ready, because I know what you're going to do. I won't be able to stop you. Doesn't say that, but it's something like that. And the young man, he's very impassioned. He's like, I'm going to go put a stop to this. He's like, why are I can't allow this to happen. So he gathers up all these other young, adventurous men, and I don't know if they build a ship. I think they do.
I think doesn't the city help them build the ship? Yeah, they get the ship either way.
Yeah. So they build a ship. I don't remember. I do think the city helps.
Yeah.
They build the ship, and he has all these young, other heroic figures with him. He's the most heroic of them, but you feel like it's a gathering of other heroic young men as well. And they go out to put a stop to this. And I think they said they have many adventures along the way that are too many to recount here. But eventually they get where they're supposed to go. And they see these maidens there, and then the hero of dreams, or the young man of dreams, I can't remember what he's called. We'll just call him the hero.
Yeah.
Simplicity.
Yep.
He encounters one of these young women who's different than the rest, and talks to her and discovers that she is the daughter of the ogress. And he's like, oh, he's like, that's unfortunate. Then if we can't be friends, I'd rather we weren't enemies because I'm here to kill him. And she's like, well, I don't have any love for him because my mother was not in agreement to have me, more or less. And he said, and she gives him, because they sort of, I guess you could say that they recognize something in each other to a sense. There's not just a connection, but it's also like you can tell that they're both like very powerful myths or something. I don't know. There's some sort of a deeper connection besides just an attraction.
Mm-hmm.
And so she tells him, well, if you're going to find my father, then you should, at the heat of the battle, pour pitch on the fire of your ship. And that's when we kind of learn that these ships aren't sailing ships. They're like steam ships of some sort.
Yeah.
And you're like, okay. I think that's when we learn that.
Yeah.
And then she also says that when you kill him, if you're able to win, it's three things actually. If you're able to win, then you want to cut the skin from the tip of one of his fingers, and that will be your map to find your way out of this archipelago type, this like large, this really mazy collection of islands and things that he has to go into.
Yeah, like I think, was it a coral reef? I don't know, but yeah. So
there's you need a map to get out, or you'd be lost.
And doesn't she say something about follow the brackish water, the really dark?
She says she gives him advice about how to not be killed. Also, which I should have said first, which is she says when you are hunting for him, only hunt till noon and then stop.
Yes.
Because he always gets people, they wear themselves out looking for him and they use up their fuel and supplies, and then he strikes when they're exhausted, essentially. Yeah. And she's like, stop at noon and then only go, so you'll conserve fuel and everything, and you won't be surprised at dark. And then also, if the water, look for wherever water is dark, because basically saying that he's underneath you, or that he stirs the mud up or something.
Yeah.
And so he says, okay. And so they go out, and again, there's a sense of like, they passed many islands and they had some small adventures and everything. So there's like some time passes, and then eventually people are starting to doubt him, and they do encounter him finally. And they have that battle. I don't know if you want to break in and if you had something you wanted to say here. I'm fine with it.
Well, this all sounded familiar to me as I was reading it, but I hadn't figured out what it was based on yet. But this was the first time for me in these novels, the two I've read so far, that I felt like I solved the riddle, because I think that's what Gene Wolfe wanted. I feel like this is he showed his hand really strongly in this one. I think the ogre's a boat.
Yeah. You get the impression that there's some kind of there's some weird. You're not really certain what's going on with it. Yeah, it sounds like it's a boat.
It's old technology.
Yeah.
These gods that are coming up from underground are old technology, and I don't know if this boat is running on AI or computer or what. But this is the first time. I think if I was reading this in a vacuum without the internet, I would have gone, oh, I guess they used to space travel, and I would have figured out the Earth thing. But I think this would have been the first time that I went, oh my God, they're talking about everything I read is through the interpretation of somebody that doesn't know what it is. I think this is where I would have realized that is right here at this moment, because I was like, this is a boat, and it's got shoulders, and the head is the control deck, and just really cool.
And I love too, because it's still described like it's a mythic encounter.
Yeah,
it's still described that way. And one of my favorite parts that I had to go back and find, which was this line when it's like they pour the pitch on the fire. So they encounter him, they pour the pitch on the fire, blinds it, and even though they suffer heavy losses, they are able to, like, obviously they start to win. And they talk about how this other ship is firing, but nothing, no blast is coming from its cannon, or something like that.
Yeah.
And then you're kind of like, oh, and it's a very like it's critically, like it's dying or something internally is wrong.
Yeah.
And then it says something about it fires shots that didn't hit, and it says that those shots, I think it says it may be, it says it may be they struck nothing but are still circling the earth searching for their target even now, or something like that. It's just really like very like, I don't know, for me it was like, what a moment. It's just like, it's like this sort of like this threat, like those shots that they fired at this young hero are still up there waiting to find their target or something, still hunting. And I just love that imagery. I don't know what it ties to anything. I just thought it was neat.
And doesn't the boat sink?
Yes. So they defeat it. They defeat the boat, and everybody just falls to the deck and just completely wasted. They're just, so many people are dead and everything else. And I think something happens. Oh, that's right. And this is a part that I'm going to say I don't understand, but it's significant, is the young hero goes and looks over the edge of the boat into this water that's very clear, and he sees something, and he stares at it for a long time, actually. He stares at it a long time, and then I think he just goes back in the cabin and just closes the door and won't come out.
Yeah.
And everybody else is too afraid to look, so like essentially his lieutenant is like, let's just get out of here. And they just back away. And it's, I think 2 or 3 days later, he comes out and he's very mad. He's obviously frustrated and kind of upset that they left, because he's like, we're in trouble. And he just stares. He's like staring at the sky for a long. They're asking, what should we do? He's just like staring at the sky for a long time. And somehow they still find this map. I don't really.
That was what I was just going to ask you.
Yeah, it's like they still find it. He's like, he looks down and he's still, they fire some guns.
Yeah.
They fire some guns because he says, follow the birds. The birds will lead us back to shore. Maybe it was a coral. I don't know. Okay, it's fine. Because I'm thinking, well, how could they not find their way to a shore? But it's okay. People are like, well, wouldn't the birds go to any island? But if it's coral, then that would make sense. So they fire some shots, and to stir some birds up. And then somewhere in that process, they either land somewhere, and I guess that like where they land is actually like part of this giant, part of this ship, part of this thing. Then that's where they get the map from. Or something like. I think I'm close. I still know that I hit the target, but
I was confused on that one too.
There's something. I know there's more going on there. I just really don't know what that is.
So then he goes home and
he goes back to the maidens, and there's a big party, and then I think does the young woman come with him? I think so.
Yes, and it's going to.
I think she did.
It's not going to end well for them, of course, but I'll get into that. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, she. Because she says, I'll never see this place again. I won't come. She says, I love you all and everything, and I'm so happy, but this will be the last time I ever see this place. I'm not coming back. Yeah. And then they go home, but the soot from the fire, where they poured pitch in the fire, has stained the sails. So I guess it's it's like a multi-power ship. Yeah. Has stained the sails, and the young man's, the scholar who had made the Man of Dreams, sees the black sails, thinks his son is dead, and throws himself off the tower and commits suicide.
Absolutely.
Which was just a sort of like, and even Severian's like, well, that doesn't make any sense. And then Jonas says, when that little girl comes up, Jonas says, that is a very old story. And I can't remember what he says about it.
It's about the founding of Athens, but you guys wouldn't know about Athens.
Right.
Which is my favorite part of this book, because when you the sales is what gave it away for me. This is the story of, and I'm going to say all these Greek names wrong, and I apologize for that, but this is Theseus and the Minotaur and the maze. And when I realized that, because I was so focused on it's a boat, like that was all I could think the whole time I was reading this, is it's a boat. But the minute he said this is about Athens, but you guys don't know about that city, I was like, what? And I went back and looked at it again, and I I should have looked up all these names. I can't even tell you, but Theseus lived in a city where they were taking women and giving them to the Minotaur at Minos, I think, and he goes and the daughter of the king gives him a yarn so that he can get through the maze. He defeats the Minotaur, comes back out. She's in love with him, and the sale thing occurs, and then he leaves her. He's not interested in her at all, and she's very angry. It's not Medea, is it?
I don't. Is it, or is that a different story?
Well, I know that Medea ends up with Jason and the Argonauts, and kills Jason and his kids.
I don't think so, because I think that's Jason.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Boy, but I don't want to put money on that.
No, I'm not.
I don't remember.
I don't have like
my Greek myth well enough.
Right.
Although I love Greek myth.
Right. Me too.
Yeah, I definitely Theseus. I feel like there's like a little bit of like Salted with Odysseus too, just sort of like these different islands. I feel like there's a little touches of that, and also because it's described like a cyclops, which is like its center gun.
Yes,
right. It's like the center eye.
Yeah, that's
so I loved all that stuff.
Yeah,
and something else I thought when I was reading it, and just like the style that he tells the story in, reminded me of like Clark Ashton Smith and just sort of these sort of mythic stories. So I just kind of reminded me a little bit of that, which I thought was kind of neat. And I know Gene Wolfe really likes Clark Ashton Smith. So
if you had to off the top of your head recommend a Clark Ashton Smith, what would it be?
Like story?
Yeah.
You know what? I'll tell you which one to get. You get a free. You can stream it on YouTube. It's The Isle of the Torturers.
Okay. Because I haven't done Smith yet, and
it's a fully produced audiobook that is on YouTube, or I'm 99% positive it is. Not a very long story. Look at that. There's ties. I think there's a little bit of ties to the Book of the New Sun in that, anyways. Yeah. Obviously with the title, and then just in general. But I think you'll like it.
Okay.
It's very similar to this.
Okay.
And I have a book of Smith. I know this is a segue. I'm sorry.
That's fine.
I have a book of his that Wolfe did the intro for. It's a collection of short stories, and G. Wolfe wrote the intro. And it was really neat because this is a little bit about Smith, but he was only wrote for like 5 years because he needed money.
Oh wow!
Like he was really a poet, and he did a lot of poetry, and he did a lot of sculptures, and all his sculptures are like these weird, this is like way before any of this stuff was like popular. He did like these weird sort of like Easter Island, like weird like ancient culture sculptures, but that look like some sort of ancient relic that you would find in some lost civilization. And that's what he did. Look up Clark Ashton Smith sculptures, and you'll be like, this is really strange. This is what he liked to do.
Wow, that's interesting.
It's really strange, and he just loved that stuff. And writing was just sort of a thing he did for a while, and he stopped when he didn't need money anymore.
Yeah,
when he was like, "Oh, I'm good again. I don't have to do that." This is what the Wolfe says in the introduction. I thought it was really neat.
Wow.
I don't know, but his style is very much like making up myths about a fantasy world. Like it feels mythic.
Yeah.
It doesn't feel like just a story. It feels like it's tied to myth somehow.
Yeah.
Anyhow, segue.
Yeah, like Lovecraft, but that could be even another segue. So I just wanted to wrap this Theseus story up. It's interesting that Jonas is in the position to understand that this is a myth that has been reinterpreted for a new society that's lasted, and I think that this is Gene Wolfe's this is the big key in this novel. We talked about keys in the last novel a lot, and the mirrors seemed like the key to me in the last novel, and they're in here as well. But this right here is him saying, this myth is being reinvented for an ancient civilization to Severian So it's the Athens myth from our time, reinterpreted by a future society that's ancient in Severian's time, and it's also the first hint or a mirror of the structure of this story, which itself is I think a myth being retold in our time of a future time. That got convoluted.
No, I get it. I like that. No, it made sense. And there's another tie. I think there's another tie too, but it does kind of break forward a little bit into later parts of this book. But because Severian has got all these ties to like water and all these other things, and Theseus was one of the creation myths for Theseus is that Poseidon was his father.
Oh yeah.
And so Theseus was very much related to the sea and everything. And so I wonder how much we're supposed to consider that Severian is a similar tie to the sea the way that Theseus does. I just feel like that's there.
Yeah.
It feels like it's there, sort of saying maybe, but I'm not certain.
Well, I have to connect the protagonist of this story to the protagonist of the story that's told.
Yes.
I mean, yeah, it's going to happen either way. To have a story like this in here feels like it's going to be a metaphor for what's going on in the main story, at least.